This is the Neurosurgery Podcast.
For what shall it profit a man if he gain the world but lose his eternal soul? Greed and generosity.
Mm-hmm.
Greed, I think, is different from envy, which is relative and comparative. Different from lust, which is that world-destroying desire. Greed is just want for more. And it can be more of anything, really. It could be more of things that are pleasurable, like we talked about with gluttony. It could be more of power, like we talked about also with gluttony or with anger. It's just the want itself for more and more of whatever that thing is. And as we've been doing, let's start with the low-hanging fruit. Money.
Yep.
Neurosurgeons make a lot of money. Some people go into neurosurgery to make a lot of money, which I think is idiotic. There's better ways to make more money that are less work and more fun. But it is certainly not a profound or novel statement to say that people are motivated by the desire for money.
Yeah, I think, fundamentally, if you look at greed, we're basically talking about material wealth, right? Basically. Yeah. And the problem with this argument is that money is fungible.
Yeah.
When you talk to people who are really into economics, they'll tell you, because money's fungible, money's just a measure of worth. So therefore, it's not that people are greedy after money, they are just trying to recognize value. And there's a lot of easy to rationalize elements of that strategy. But greed is a different animal. Greed is when, let's say in neurosurgery, when people are doing things that maybe they shouldn't be doing in order to seek profit. Mm. And there's where it departs a bit. And of course, spine in this realm is the number one hitter, right? Yeah. Spine is the big one.
Yeah. And I guess as we march through these deadly sins, it's a theme we keep returning to where it's the motivation, not the action. And some of these things brush elbows with healthy motivations, right? Like if you want to have a lot of money so that you can blank, where blank is provide for your family, send your kids to a good school, keep them safe, clothes on their back, comfortable house, take care of your aging parents. If you want a lot of money for X, that's great. That's a healthy, motivating drive. But if you want money for the sake of money, I think that's where we get into the sinful category of greed, where it's the desire to have for the sake of having.
So there's a caveat to this. I think it's quite important from a religious aspect, which is there are a number of people who are in neurosurgery, and certainly many more who are not in neurosurgery, who feel like the justification for the profit seeking, I won't put greed's label on it yet, is so that they can operationalize charitable initiatives. Mm-hmm. So we see this a lot.
Yeah.
People come from the third world. They come to America. They then, I hate to say it, they do a lot of clinical work, but they also, to some degree, profit seek. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I don't want to piss anybody off, offend people, but people know who they are that are doing this. And then they feel like the solve for this is that they're going to open an orphanage in Pakistan. Right. Is the classic. And then we see this, of course, in the finance world, where people are big benefactors of museums and universities and initiatives.
Yeah. You pay it back somehow, and so then it makes it all okay. Right. There's a whole branch of Christianity in America that is explicitly oriented towards amassing material wealth so that you can do charitable works. But it's like a Christian capitalist conglomeration, right? And it is easy to fall into that temptation because, again, as we keep kind of hammering on, you go through college, you go through medical school, amass all this debt, And you can say to yourself, I'm giving up, I'm giving up, I'm giving up, I am owed X. And you spend so long not having that you get used to wanting to have those things that you've given up during your time of training, your time of austerity. I mean, here's a pile of gold.
Right.
Who doesn't want gold? How much blood has been spilled for gold?
Right.
Right? Which is just a metal. But as you say, it's something that is fungible, and it's
Measure of value.
a physical, for the gold people out there that can hear that it's real, a physical manifestation of the intangible value. And I almost want to immediately set aside money, because money is money, and people have been talking about greed for money and the pursuit of money for as long as people have been talking, frankly. And I think something that is far more often traded among neurosurgeons or among any busy professionals or anyone who has multiple plates spinning in the air, someone who has a family and a career, is our time. And it's hard to think about a greed for time, but the corresponding virtue to greed, generosity, I think is one of the ways that the truly great in our field and people who are great mentors and teachers and guides for the young, the way that those people shine brightest is when they are generous with their time. Because anyone can be generous with money. Any rich person can make a donation or establish a scholarship or endow this chair or what have you, but there are only so many people who can educate, mentor, and guide the young in their own field. And when you get to that level, it's easy to be burnt out. It's easy to just want to do your own thing. Or, hey, I have a wife, I have kids, I want to get home. But you put in the extra time to talk to your chief about the plan for a case, to go in and personally show an intern or a PGY2 how to do what to you is a thoughtlessly simple part of a procedure. So I'm nowhere near that level. Though, again, to me, that's taking the time to talk to one of my juniors about how they phrase a note or staffing something or plan something logistically at a very, very junior level in the hospital. You just got an MBA, you have a wife and kids, you have a practice that you're running, and yet you're in a teaching hospital, you have fellows and residents, and I've heard you talk, and I've personally witnessed how deeply and passionately you feel about taking the time to train the next generation of surgeons. How do you find the generosity to give them even more of your time, more of your life to neurosurgery, so generously to teach?
I'm not really that good at it at a fundamental level. I would think that at Rush, right, you have a number of attendings that are very good at this, like Rich Byrne, right? Rich really would try to teach people how to operate.
Now a Floridian.
Now Floridian, yes, thank you.
My hometown.
Welcome to Jacksonville, Rich.
Yeah.
I think it's hard because time is so valuable, right? And I literally shave minutes off the day.
Yeah.
But when you think about what's happening in people's minds when they're in training, it is so difficult to get through the daily grind of what they have to do. So, my strategy was really simple. You experienced it. I don't take a lot of people under my wing.
No.
I don't want to trifle with people who they're really not committed. And there are other folks much better at that. But I think that for neurosurgeons in general, even if you're in a community hospital and you're talking to a high school student or a medical student that's in a community medical school, the impact we have is so huge. I do realize that if I take 5 seconds to say hello to somebody and just encourage them, it is impactful.
Yeah.
And that is worth space. It pays back in an exponential way.
Yeah. And And I think it improves the community we live in and the perception of us in the community. I think anyone who works with me has heard me talk about this. I think I've talked about it on a podcast before, perhaps when we did the Hell Week series, but you were talking about the ecosystem of the emergency room in the episode on wrath and anger. I think deeply about seeing people in the emergency room. And I don't just mean interacting with the residents and attendings and the nurses and the staff down there, our colleagues, but the patient. And talking about generosity of time, and this is actually a lesson I got from you in your clinic when I was in medical school, because you could spend 5 minutes in a room with someone in your clinic and they can feel like they spent an hour with you if you can recognize what they need and get straight to the fundamentals, right? And so when I see someone in the emergency room, you can take an extra minute to spend with a person and they feel like they've had a meaningful connection, a real clinical encounter. Or on the other hand, I could say, I'm a resident, I'm tired, I have to see 40 people, It's 2 a.m. You walk in, hey, push your feet, hold your hands up in the air, and you can get the information that you need from them without giving any of the information they need from you. Or conversely, you can take 1 minute and be generous with your time, actually have a clinical interaction with that person, allay their fears, right? This is what my junior's gonna roll their eyes, but this is what I always say. Imagine you're in an emergency room, you're wearing a hospital gown with no pants, you're sitting in a bed and no one has seen you for 3 hours, they scanned your head 2 hours ago, no one has said a word to you about it, and then some tired looking dude with a 5 o'clock shadow and bags under his eyes walks in and says, hey, I'm John with Neurosurgery. And then immediately you go, whoa, they scanned my head and a neurosurgeon is here. Holy shit, right? I would be terrified.
Yeah.
And so, hey, I'm John with Neurosurgery. Lift your hands in the air, lighten your eyes, move your feet. Okay, bye. And you just get out of there and you just take what you need, or, and this is what I try to impart to anyone that is my junior resident right now, you take 60 seconds. My opening line, 9 times out of 10, hey, Dr. Colson with Neurosurgery, you don't need any surgery right now. And then you actually explain to them what's going on. You know, the reason a neurosurgeon is here in your room, you don't need any surgery, but blah, 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 and allay that fear. And then they walk away from, as you often point out, you know, the mystique that surrounds neurosurgeons. That might be the only time in that person's life they meet a neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
Right?
That is, lucky for us in the ER, fairly binary, at least initially, right? In other words, do you need us to do something or not now? And you're absolutely right. They need that information. But the groundwork you lay going into that is that you've discussed with ER doctors, nurses, PAs, techs already. So they know you.
Yeah.
And I think that groundwork you talked about being generous with your time up front is what really makes that possible. Because we are limited in it can only be in one place at one time, right? But let's go back to the money, because the money is so big and gold and money is so amazing, right? What is it about us that makes people worried that, well, you know, there's something going on here where we're the highest paid doctors, spine surgeons, neurosurgeons, and people don't necessarily trust us, right? This is back to the Gooby and Dooby thing. Mm-hmm. Like, he's alleging that we are part of this system that is essentially profit-taking without consideration for human long-term benefit or whatever he's talking about, right? I would push back hard, but the reality is that there is an optic here that's weird.
Yeah.
What does Rick Fessler say?
I think Dr. Fessler is one of the staunchest and foremost proponents of treating the patient, not the scam, that you can imagine. He's a minimalist, not just minimally invasive, but he's a minimalist as a surgeon and physician. Levels, sides, intervention, all that stuff. Focal. You can always do more, but you can never take it back.
Yeah.
And that's not a way to generate all the RVUs in the world, right?
It is certainly not a way to generate revenue, right? Because we are, to some degree, and rightfully so, paid for what we do.
Yeah.
I don't know that going the other way around is better. I mean, we should be paid for what we do because what we do is risk. Paid for risk and benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the amount of time you put in to develop what you're able to do.
I mean, God forbid the day when a lit pays better than an acoustic aroma, because then lit is going to be done on people who don't need lit, right? Like, people don't always think about what the unintended consequences of the policy treatment's going to be, right? So the policy change will be, well, let's just treat all spinal fusions the same as decompressions. Okay, fine. Nobody gets fusions ever again.
Yeah.
Right. So all the spondies fall apart, and then people just suffer.
Yeah. What's interesting about money is that it's such it's a focal point for so many aspects of your life, because as you said, it's a reflection of value. It's an analog for your time, right? We talked before about the non-interchangeability of time and money. But you put a certain amount of time into something, you get rewarded for this much money. You put effort into something, and you get rewarded with this much money. An hour is an hour, but the way you spend that hour, there's great variability. And so when I was thinking about this more and more, greed or generosity, where you can give your material possessions, you can give your time, but I could sit here next to you at this bar for an hour and be on my phone, because the time itself is not even the tip of the spear for this, but it's our attention.
Yeah.
Right? And you could spend 5 hours in a clinic room with a patient and not listen to them, or you could spend 5 minutes and hone in person to person and give them your full attention. And I think we both know which would be preferred. And so there are so many little ways that we hoard or give generously our attention. Reading a draft of a paper that one of your residents sends to you, or looking over films that one of your clinic patients finally got sent in from another hospital, or again, taking the time to walk one of your fellows through what you think is a simple part of the procedure. More than your money, more than your time, you as an attending neurosurgeon and fellowship director, but just as a man, I keep trying to bring it back to our lives, not just the job. I think our attention is the most precious resource that we have, because our minds can be anywhere, wherever we are.
Well, there's a personal.
How do you budget it?
There's a personal level, right? You're talking about the personal level, and that's very important, right? How you account for, your influence on individual people one by one as you talk to people, and that is incredibly important. The budgeting of it is really important. But I do want to bring it back to the societal level too.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the movie This Is 40.
Okay.
Okay, do you remember the part where Paul Rudd is talking to his father-in-law, who's a spine surgeon, John Lithgow, and they're at the birthday party?
Yeah.
They're like, so how much, I'm sorry, his father is talking to his son's father-in-law, and he's like, how much do you guys get paid to do these surgeries? And he goes, oh, it's really not like, gentlemanly to talk about how much we get paid. But give me a ballpark, right?
Yeah.
He's like, and you fix hunchbacks, right? So like every time you don't see a hunchback, is that you fixing them and making money? And it's like this whole diatribe in a movie that's been watched by probably 50 million people, right? About spine surgeons and money. And you don't see that with even, let's take the other extreme, plastic surgeons who do surgery for cash.
Right.
They don't talk about how much is spent on breast augmentation or facelifts or stem cells. But when it comes to spine surgery and fixing hunchbacks with the John Lithgow character, right, who was never around for his kids, it's a great commentary as a popular rom-com, right, about spine surgery. How do we arrive at the situation? I agree with you that the antidote is that on a personal level, we all commit. We commit that we are going to be better with our patients. We're going to make sure they understand that we're not criminals and we're doing the right thing by them, et cetera, et cetera. But at a societal level, we face this. I mean, that's why we have to talk about it, right?
Yeah. Well, then let's get big picture, because so many of these sins that we've talked about so far, there's not really a role for community overwatch. I mean, sure, the licensure and professional boards for drug abuse and alcoholism, sure. Aside from that, a committee of neurosurgeons isn't going to be censuring another neurosurgeon because he cheated on his wife for lust, or because he was climbing the corporate ladder for pride and greed, or because he put his face on a billboard, But in this domain, somebody out there doing unindicated surgeries to make more money, especially in spine, who can police that if not spine surgeons? Who watches the watchman, right? So I have aside from committing myself to be good when I get out there, I don't really have a capacity to try to police the community. Talk to the younger surgeons, the trainees, or the people who are just getting out there, finding themselves out in the real world, finally outside the walled garden of residency, and going, holy shit, he's doing what? Like, what do you do when one of your partners, even, or just somebody down the street who patients come to you for a revision, and Chris Dunch is down the street. Yeah. What do you do? Nobody loves a snitch.
Well, we're not empowered to police other people.
Yeah.
As societies, even the board, or AANS, CNS. So the only thing you can do is lead by example, right? Like, I spend probably a good part of my time, I'm going to say about 15 to 20 patients a week, talking them out of surgery or reassuring them they don't need a surgery, right? So it's very important. That's a service. You get paid very little for that.
Yeah.
I think that if I could plead to people, like I personally always try to do the least levels, the least number of approaches, meaning very few front backs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. I'm just saying, like, I try to minimize it. I try to make it up on the idea that I'm trying to fix people. So if I can fix 500 people a year, right? That's a lot of surgery. But those are 500 lives hopefully changed for the better. That's the way I look at the calculus. It's like a ledger in the goal of functionality, pain control, and humanity. It's much more complicated to measure that than, RVUs or collections or case counts or hours in the OR, whatever you want it, contribution margin, all these metrics we do use. And I think to Dr. Gooby's point, those metrics fall flat of understanding how much you help people. You can help someone as much with a microdisc as you can with a T10 and pelvis. That doesn't mean you need to do only microdisc or only T10 and pelvis. It means you do what's appropriate.
Yeah.
But getting spine surgeons to sign on board for that is very difficult because the metrics are too available.
Yeah. Well, then, I guess to wrap this up, more so than any other sin on this list, or we could say any other motivation on this list, greed has a special place in America.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because we're a capitalist society. And so I'll just put the question to you. If you think about outcomes and extraneous harm along the way, if you talk about wrath, if you channel wrath and embody wrath for the greater good, you kill one to save 1,000, you're killing someone.
Yep.
If you embody greed for the greater good, Gordon Gekko, right? Wall Street, greed is good, right? You're not really hurting people, you're out competing them.
Yeah.
So I'll just ask you, Dr. Wang, is greed good?
No, greed is not good. Because because we're too smart. Neurosurgeons are too smart. So neurosurgeons will optimize for greed. Optimization for greed is evil. Because what it means is that all you care about is whatever metric you're measuring, whether it be contribution margin, case count, RVUs, collections. And there are lots of easy ways to optimize those. And anybody who thinks they know the tricks, we all know the tricks. You're not the first to arrive at this. You're not Odysseus by making a way to optimize RVUs by adding on codes that are sort of on the fringe. We all know how to do that. The problem is that because our system is set up the way Gooby did say, he's not wrong about the fact that our system is built on a system of measurement. And that measurement allows for the measurement of greed-inspired efforts. But in the end, I do believe that all the neurosurgeons and spine surgeons out there, for the large part, are trying to do the right thing. But you throw in something that put a thumb on the scale, and everything changes. So I'm not asking for the system to change. I'm asking for people that don't fuck with the system we have. And we are at a bit of an existential crisis for this, because people are doing things a little bit too obviously because they're measured. It's too easy, It's too easy to measure people and say, look, there's no way that makes any sense. Now, look, maybe that person doesn't, like, I have no life. I'm constantly working or doing this stuff. I'm the worst. Like, I never even went to a single sporting event of my kids, and they only had like 8. So, for all the people who are like, well, there's no way you do that. Yeah, I do it. But even then, anybody could look at the metric and say, well, come on, you do 640 cases a year. Yeah, because I'm always at the hospital. So, but that being said, it is easy to measure.
And so the harder metric, the more complicated metric,
is outcome and quality.
Yeah.
Very hard to measure, not the outcomes we use today. Bullshit.
And optimizing for that is harder too.
They're optimizing who did the DVT prophylaxis. Like, that's not an outcome. That's a metric. Yeah.
Well said. I gotta say, we've been on a marathon with these.
Yep.
I'm getting a little tired.
Yes.
Are you? I'm feeling a little...
Feeling lethargic.
Yeah. Well, we only have one sin left.
One more.
And it's sloth. So maybe we can kick back and talk about taking it easy.
Let's do it.